So this pragmatic, real-world approach is something I admire in Trump.
Okay, so I think honestly I can agree with most of that, and I do think he's had a novel effect on the political scene because of this. What I'm arguing is that everything you're describing about Trump is actually a description of the man, and it's not a description of the kind of procedures of the office, of the presidential office. And this is what I think is great about Trump, and I think it's what people like about him, is that they see him, I think, in a more realistic, like people that really like him because I don't think they really care about the kind of procedures of state. You know, like everyone says, like, you have to be presidential, and that was one of the big problems with Trump, is that he wasn't presidential. But what they meant by that is sort of doing things in a way that everyone does, you know. So when I say that there's been a certain devaluation of the office, the executive office, what I mean by that is it's been revealed in the behavior, actions, constant media stream about Trump that what the executive office is in fact is not some holy exalted position. It's not something where you go there and you pull all the right levers that the kind of founding fathers have set up and it means that you get a peaceful society. That's not it at all.
Right.
That it is a person who in his office is instantiating justice as he sees fit and possible, right? And I think that freaks liberals out. Why? Well, because what liberalism is all about is mechanics, right? So we set up the division of powers, the branches of government, we set up the rules, the laws, and then if we can we don't need virtue, we don't need to be good, we don't need grace, we don't need God, right? We don't need any of that stuff to make it all peaceful. All we got to do is get the mechanism right? Get the economy ordered right, print the right amount of money and give it to the right amount of people, put it in the right bank accounts, this sort of thing. Someone said that the kind of essence of liberalism, they said neoliberalism, but whatever, is the idea that society is programmable. That's what it is. And so Trump breaks that, right? Because it's just so obvious when you're watching him that this isn't a man who's running the program. He ran on not running the program, really. Okay, so when I say there's been a certain devaluation, I mean that what that does, like as a catechetical sort of reality, is teaches people that what's true of that executive office is true of the executive office that you have. What does it mean to be the executive? It means to be able to make a decision, right? Kind of command decision. Every father has that. Every mother has that. Everyone who has any sort of strength, power, authority has that over others, you know, for the sake of others is the Christian term, right? That it's not like just to do what you want, right? Exactly. You know, all powers for those who need it, who need you, the weaker than you. So, and this is what Christ says. Okay, so I do think that Trump has done a real service here because he has, I think, destabilized the idea that we can somehow have liberalism, have our world, and it can all work out without ourselves acting decisively, being virtuous, doing the brave thing at a personal level, right? Now, Now, maybe that's...
Bagel.
Yeah. And for those who don't believe that, right, which I think is a product of losing your Christianity, right, which is, namely, you want peace without virtue. You want peace without Christ. You want peace without grace.
Yeah, you want a cross with no Savior hanging on it.
Right, precisely. Once you lose that, Joe Biden's your best bet. Why? Well, because Joe Biden, I think, died 2 years ago. And he's just being...
Weekend at Joe's.
Right, exactly. So he's being, and that's perfect. Why? Because the whole ideal is a mechanism that doesn't actually require a person.
No, I agree. You have Joe Biden is the ideal inert entity that the Democratic oligarchs can 100%. They can paint whatever things that they want. Right. He won't even say God.
Yeah.
The thing. What?
Yeah. And I think you just pointed out to the kind of real evil behind this, because that whole belief that it's just the mechanism, right, that works for all the kind of like run-of-the-mill liberals, but the people who are running the show know that it's them and that it's power.
Right.
The whole point of a mechanism is that someone runs it. Right. You set up a whole, mass-producing factory. Right.
Yeah, and the puppets are realistic. You can't see the string.
Right. Of
but
course.
someone else is pulling those strings.
Right. And that's what's effective about mechanism. Okay, so Kanye. Okay, so Trump has done a great service here. But I think Kanye completes it. I think he finishes the good work. Why? Because I think in the same way, you're not going to get a mechanistic response from Kanye, right? And even more so, what you're going to get is someone that answers that question that Trump brought up. Okay, so Trump destabilizes. It's just people. People are making choices. You got to be brave. You got to do the right thing. You got to do it well. You got to make the deal, and it's on you. It's not on some kind of system that works without you.
Don't wait for Uncle Sam.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay. What do people need in order to do that? They need Jesus. And I mean this sincerely. This isn't like a pietistic rant, because I'm good at those. Don't let me do it. What Kanye does is he said this before, like the point of him running is to serve Jesus Christ and to take that authority. And he said it before. He says that what we're going to do is we're going to have nothing but God anymore. God will be what's orientating the state, the political campaign of Kanye. So he takes God as first and foremost, right? And I think there's a realism here, a real political realism, that once you destabilize this idea of mechanism, right? Once you can't buy that anymore because you've just watched Trump for 4 years and you're like, okay, everything's up for grabs in a certain respect. Then I think you really need someone to remind us that the way that we're virtuous, the way that we really virtuously operate our executive power that we have is in and through the grace of Jesus Christ, who allows us to become virtuous, who allures us into virtue, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what is missing in a certain respect from the Trump presidency, is that he's not willing, right, to take that final step beyond the liberal mechanism of a secular political sphere in which, we just get things done on our human willpower alone.
What's the thing he hasn't? What's the finish line you think he hasn't attained, or the hammer's not hit the nail home? What is the missing ingredient to you?
His missing ingredient is that he needs to expressly say that he is instantiating the eternal law of God by his particular acts of executive
He needs
power.
to say that he's doing this?
I think I won't say that he couldn't do it without saying it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that for the purpose of achieving the awakening of subsidiarity in the American mind, I think he or someone should. Because knowing that a real return to order, you have this whole thing, make America great. How do we make America great? Well, in the end, if we're really honest about this, you're going to make America great by a return to Jesus Christ.
No argument there. To me, Trump is, to use a remote historical analogy, Trump is Cyrus. Trump's the bad man Cyrus, protecting God's people. Trump's the hammer. I used to keep using the crowbar metaphor. He's prying apart people at the sinews. Donald Trump is the inverse opposite of Pope Francis. They are doppelgangers. They both have subverted the expectations of their followers. They both leverage social media to unprecedented degrees. They're both divisive. And Trump, like Pope Francis, Donald Trump is magical mask removal cream. When you see him and hear him and watch the decisions he's made, your mask has to drop, and all your primal impulses emerge. And there's no meh reaction to Trump. He inspires rather intense admiration or visceral contempt. Just when we thought Bush derangement syndrome was taking over the world, it couldn't hold a candle to Trump derangement syndrome. That's right. And it's odd because it's not like he's not Mike Pence. He's not He doesn't have a Catholic background. I don't even know if Trump goes to church regularly. I don't know. I do know that in his public speeches, again, unless he's a skilled liar, I know at least one of his speechwriters who's a very sharp Catholic, Trump wants identification with Jesus. He wants to defend Christ at Christmas. His message to Easter blew my mind. As we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he didn't have to be so explicit in what Easter is.
Sure.
Bill Clinton will talk about, like, Clinton's Thanksgiving edicts are hilarious by accident. Well, we give thanks to the Tooth Fairy. It's all very vague.
Yeah.
Again, there's that inert quality where,
Yeah.
oh, he's a Christian. No, he didn't. Listen to the words he wrote. He didn't say Christ, Christian, resurrection, nothing like that. But he said what you wanted him to say. What you think he said, for you he said.
Yeah. No, but I do think...
Like a living Rorschach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. No, but I do think Trump is still a liberal in this regard, in the sense that I've been reading a lot of his sort of moments where he's talking about Christianity, and it's always a exterior sort of protection of the freedom of individuals to be Christian if they so choose, and even a celebration of Christian heritage and stuff like that. I mean, the liberal society has been fine with that for hundreds of years. We can incorporate Christianity as long as it doesn't have political consequences, right? So like a kind of Thanksgiving speech. So, for instance, in his different addresses on prayer in public school, I find this is a good example of Trump and Kanye. Trump says again and again, the hard left are coming to take away the right of teachers and students to pray in schools. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to protect your rights. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that's something pretty rad, right? Like, thanks, Trump. Protect the rights of Christians, right? Now, Kanye, on the same subject, said that we need to instantiate the fear and love of God in every organization in the country. And he's speaking on prayer in schools. He says, by doing so, we will chill the fear and love of everything else. Okay, and so, what he means is we're going to order our love so it's actually orientated towards God, and this will enable us not to fear and love simply power, money, whatever. I think the difference is crucial, right? On the one hand, you have a certain protector of the Christian flock who's not himself in it, right?
That one's hard to adjudicate.
Well, let me put it this way. In his statements, what's primary is the individual freedom, right? So this person is free to pray and be Christian if they choose, and I want to protect that freedom, right? But that's not a properly Catholic vision of what freedom is. We know this. Why? Because you could say the same thing about a Satanist, right? This is a person who individually freely chooses to pray to Satan, and he has that right granted to him by,
According to Justice Stevens, the Constitution guarantees that his worldview is true for him.
Absolutely, true for him. And that's where we've arrived. I don't think that's actually I don't think that's some kind of surprise that we've arrived there, right? Which is like the moment you determine that what freedom is a bare freedom of the individual, license, as you called it, then of course you have to protect the rights of the Satanist who wants to pray as much as the Christian, right? So while I think it's good that Trump only talks about the Christians, the form of his protection of school prayer in this particular instance is that liberal form of freedom, right? There's something libertine about Trump.
Yeah, I think this is the nub. This is the nub here. Because I think Kanye West functions as a preacher.
I think you're right.
And not a politician. I don't think it's the job of the president to be instilling in people by fiat, by laws, by the things that he bans and the things that he promotes, focusing on individual Christian faith conversion. I think that needs to happen and should happen. I'm happy to join forces with Protestants across the board on that. But that's not that's not given to us as what the role of the president is. I think the United States president as a role, the executive branch, is rather limited. There's something analogous in my mind to the charism of infallibility. It's a negative protection against error. So the president has certain limits. He can't endorse one religion, but he needs to protect the rights of all, including the rights of Satanists. Now, sin has no right. I'm not likening them, but unless you have wide support for the banning of certain worldviews, I think back to subsidiarity, people at the local level need to have those fistfights, whether it's banning porn. Usually community standard laws are enough to get rid of the perv shops in that certain area of town.
Yeah, totally.
As opposed to, I decree it all banned.
Sure.
You're going to quickly shove it underground.
Yeah. Yeah, and that might be the nub, because I think our nation needs a preacher. And I think that we live in 2020 in the age of the greatest number of executive orders that we've ever seen. Bush, Obama, Trump. I mean, we're just spewing them out. The idea of the kind of official negative power role of the president, I think is kind of cracking at all the seams, because what we're actually seeing is the use of power, and Congress is backpedaling and can't keep up with presidents, So maybe I'm doing kind of a practical politics, and the reason why is because like we've said in this discussion, the official status of the executive branch, as sort of spelled out by our founders and interpreted by our courts, is not, while not unimportant or to be belittled, right, is not itself the executive power which we all wield and are required to orientate towards the instantiation of justice on this earth. So if I die, right, or let's say I became president and then I died, because that sounds like a better life, and I face Jesus, right, and he says, all right, you coming in or not? And I say, well, I'm coming in for sure, because I followed precedent and I made sure to use my powers within the office that was granted to me. And I don't believe, this might be a point of difference, I acknowledge that, but I don't believe that is what gets me the well done, good and faithful servant, right? I believe that I would have to say things like, I fed the hungry, I protected the weak, I did acts of justice that were within my power to do, and not merely those that were within my office.
Yeah.
So let me just finish this thought before you just tear me down. I think that we live in a kind of crazy time. We are absolutely obsessed with media imagery, right? We have very little interior life. People have become vicious in a way that makes them so open to suggestion, right? That it's like unprecedented. You talked about Trump hypnotizing the nation, and I'm like, yeah, probably. He might have that power because of the viciousness of the populace. I mean, you look at any truly vicious populace, and part of what characterizes vice is a certain subservience to, whatever rule is happening. I mean, you have this ability to be moved in a way that a holy person can kind of stand outside of the stream of history and politics and say, no, I'm going to do the right thing. I don't care. Okay, so you have a crazy age, right? You have a celebrity president who's been sitting for 4 years and running the ship with relatively little disaster, but with the kind of appearance of disaster. That's what's ridiculous about the media, right? They're like...
The creation of disaster is the main job of CNN and company.
Exactly. It's like...
to create the appearance of disaster. They always go to the mentally ill. Totally. What happened to compassion for the suffering and the marginalized? No, he's crazy.
That's right. I mean, that's what they're doing to Kanye. Yeah.
Right.
So what I'm saying, though, is that in this instance, I think what is more proper to the instantiation of actual justice is someone who will go beyond King Cyrus and move into the role of a Hezekiah. Go beyond King Cyrus and move into the role of even, just the role of a believer. And what I mean by that is not, because I agree, I don't know what Trump believes, and I'm not here to judge that. But someone who will point out incessantly, and within this craziness, in the sense of keep it crazy, let the media keep being crazy, let's up the whole disaster game, because what we have here, let's be realistic, we have a bunch of people watching TV. That's right now what's doing politics and what's, getting people riled up and making decisions and forming their consciences. And I think it sucks, but here we are. So get someone there who will speak against the evil of abortion as a fundamental injustice in our country, one that colors all others, and show people and tell people about the need for Jesus Christ in order to have that grace that he brings, in order to be themselves political. That's to say, in order to enable them to instantiate justice in their particular low-level community, right? Families, local politics, right? That Parks and Rec guy, right? And then I do think you would have the best possible moment for a ban on abortion. I do think that. You're talking to people on the bottom, you're instantiating it from the top. And granted, I'm a bit of a pessimist in this regard, that I just don't see not having some form of civil war, in the sense that you cannot have a people committed to the killing of the children of a nation and a people who are being converted from that and saying we shouldn't kill the children of a nation, and come to some kind of synthesis, some kind of like, okay, well, both of these opinions can, that's what we've been trying to do, right? You can be pro-life, you can be pro-choice, but we can have both of these things within our sort of benevolent, sort of neutral political sphere where we just let them play out. Like, so I think it's the time for this kind of radical move. And
you think Kanye's the man to do it?
I do. I mean, I don't think that anyone else could do quite what he does.